concrete cracks under heavy orthotic soles. Blood pools thick like motor oil. 6 guns trained on the city's most dangerous man. He was dead. They all knew it. Then the diner door swung open. Out stepped 300 lb of tired Waitress, holding a garbage bag and a grudge. The late-night shift at the chrome skillet had a specific rhythm. It was the sound of grease popping on a flat-top grill, the low hum of the refrigeration units, and the shuffling drag of Nora's rubber-soled shoes against cracked linoleum. Nora weighed 312 lb. She knew the exact number because the doctor at the free clinic wrote it on a yellow notepad last Tuesday, while telling her she needed to walk more. Nora had laughed, a harsh, scraping sound. She walked 7 a shift on a floor coated in 30 years of aerosolized bacon fat. Her knees were wrapped in thick, beige ace bandages beneath her slacks. Her inner thighs chafed despite the cheap powder she dusted on in the employee bathroom. She carried her weight in her stomach and hips, a thick, solid block of flesh that made her invisible to 99% of the human race. People didn't look at fat women in stained pink aprons. They looked through them. They saw a coffee pot. They saw a basket of fries. They saw a punchline or a cautionary tale, but they rarely saw a person. Nora preferred it that way. Invisibility was a tactical advantage she hadn't enjoyed in her previous life. It was 3:15 a.m. The diner was empty, save for a long-haul trucker snoring softly in booth 4. Nora wiped down the laminate counter, her thick forearm moving in steady, sweeping circles. She was exhausted. A deep, bone-hollowing ache radiated from her lower back up to her neck. She checked the clock. Time to take out the trash. She walked to the back kitchen, hauling 2 massive black plastic bags from the industrial bins. They easily weighed 50 albas each, filled with wet coffee grounds, half-eaten meatloaf, and soggy napkins. She didn't drag them. She gripped the plastic necks in her wide, calloused hands and hoisted them, carrying the weight against her thick thighs. She kicked open the heavy steel fire door that led to the underground parking garage. The air in this garage was stagnant, smelling of exhaust, damp concrete, and piss. The fluorescent tube lights overhead flickered, casting a sickly yellow pall over the parked cars. Nora walked toward the dumpsters, her breathing loud in the cavernous space. Then she heard the wet, unmistakable sound of a fist hitting a human jaw. She stopped. The shadow of a concrete pillar hid her from the main thoroughfare of the garage. She gently set the garbage bags down by the wheels of a rusted sedan. No noise. She crept forward, her rubber soles completely silent on the pavement. In the center lane of the parking structure, bathed in the glow of a failing halogen bulb, were 7 men. 6 of them were standing. They wore dark jackets, practical boots, and the kind of quiet, predatory confidence that came from knowing you held all the cards. They carried heavy steel pipes and suppressed handguns. The 7th man was on his knees. Nora recognized him immediately. Leo Gallagher. The local news called him an organized crime kingpin, a ruthless operator who controlled the docks and the import routes on the east side. Nora knew him as the guy who came into the diner every Tuesday and Thursday at 200 a.m. He always sat in booth 6. He always ordered rye toast, dry, and a black coffee, and he never ever treated her like a piece of furniture. When she poured his coffee, he looked her in the eyes. He said, "Thank you, Nora." He left a $50 bill under his saucer. Right now, Gallagher wasn't looking like a kingpin. His expensive wool overcoat was torn. Blood dripped from a deep laceration above his left eye, running down his sharp jawline and soaking into his white collar. His left arm hung uselessly at his side, the shoulder visibly dislocated or shattered. He was breathing heavy, his chest rising and falling in erratic jerks. "End of the line, Leo," one of the men said. He was tall, thin, with a jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He stepped forward, raising a suppressed pistol, aiming it directly at Gallagher's face. The boss says, "Hello." Gallagher didn't flinch. He didn't beg. He just spit a glob of blood onto the concrete near the man's boots. "Tell him he's a coward for not doing this himself." The man with the scar smiled. "Doesn't matter. You're just as dead." Nora stood in the shadows. She felt the heavy rhythmic thud of her own heart against her ribs. She was tired. She had $60 in her checking account. Her feet felt like they were packed in ground glass. Walking away was the smart play. Walking away was why she was still alive at 45. She had left her old life behind in a shallow grave outside Detroit a decade ago. She was just a waitress now, just a fat, tired woman who needed a hot shower and a decent mattress. She looked at Gallagher. He was bleeding out, refusing to give them the satisfaction of fear. Then she looked at the heavy, solid iron lug wrench resting on top of a discarded tire near her right foot. It was covered in grease, 2 hefty long, and heavy as a sledgehammer. Nora let out a slow, silent breath. She felt the familiar icy calm wash over her brain. It was a physical sensation, a dropping of temperature behind her eyes. The ache in her knees vanished. The exhaustion evaporated, replaced by a crystalline rush of adrenaline. She bent down, her thick fingers curled around the cold iron of the wrench. It felt familiar. It felt like home. Nora didn't yell. She didn't charge in with a battle cry. She simply stepped out from behind the concrete pillar and walked directly into the pool of yellow light. "Hey," she said. Her voice was flat, carrying perfectly through the damp air of the garage. All 7 men turned. The man with the scar lowered his pistol a fraction of an inch, blinking in confusion. He looked at her stained pink apron, her messy bun, the sheer bulk of her. A momentary look of annoyance crossed his face, followed quickly by cruel amusement. "Get lost, Porky," the scar-faced man said, waving a hand dismissively. "Take your trash and waddle back to the kitchen before we put a hole in you." 2 of the other men chuckled. Gallagher stared at her, his eyes widening. He tried to speak, to tell her to run, but all that came out was a wet cough. Nora didn't stop walking. She closed the distance with a steady, rolling gait. I said, "Freeze, you fat bitch." The man nearest to her barked, stepping forward and raising his pipe. He never finished the sentence. Nora didn't swing the iron wrench with her arm. She swung it with her core, 300 lb of mass, rotated on a planted foot. The iron bar moved in a brutal horizontal arc. It caught the man directly in the side of his right knee. The sound was like a thick, dry branch, snapping under a boot. The man didn't even scream right away. His leg folded backward at an impossible angle, and he collapsed, the shock instantly short-circuiting his brain. Before he hit the ground, Nora was already moving. She let her forward momentum carry her. She slammed her left shoulder directly into the chest of the second man. It was like getting hit by a small car. The air left his lungs in a violent rush as he was thrown backward, his skull bouncing off the hood of a parked Mercedes with a hollow thud. He slumped unconscious. The remaining 4 men froze for a fraction of a second. It was the cognitive dissonance. Their brains simply could not process the velocity and devastation coming from the woman in the waitress uniform. That fraction of a second was all Nora needed. The scar-faced man raised his gun, but Nora was already inside his guard. She didn't try to wrestle the gun away. She reached out with her left hand, grabbed a fistful of his thick jacket, and pulled him violently toward her, stepping off the center line. As he stumbled forward, she drove the heavy iron wrench upward in a short, vicious jab. The iron crushed his larynx. He dropped the gun, clutching his throat, his eyes bulging as he choked on nothing. 3 left. They finally realized this wasn't a joke. They moved to flank her. One raised a gun. Nora didn't hesitate. She grabbed the choking, scar-faced man by the collar and hauled his thrashing body between her and the shooter. 2 suppressed shots hit the human shield with wet slaps. As the shooter adjusted his aim, Nora let the dying man drop, sweeping the fallen pistol from the concrete smoothly. She didn't adopt a stance. She simply pointed and pulled the trigger twice. 2 flat thips. The shooter took a round to the collarbone and another through the bridge of his nose. He folded instantly. The last 2 men panicked. One lunged at her with a pipe. Nora took the hit on her thick left bicep. It bruised instantly, a flare of hot pain, but the padding of her flesh absorbed the worst of the impact. She didn't even flinch. She grabbed the man's wrist, clamped it tight against her chest, and headbutted him. Flesh met bone. The man's nose shattered, spraying crimson across Nora's pink apron. He staggered back, blindingly trying to wipe the blood from his eyes. Nora shot him in the kneecap, then put a round in his chest as he went down. The final man didn't fight. He dropped his weapon, turned, and sprinted toward the garage exit, his boots echoing wildly on the pavement. Nora raised the gun, tracked his spine, and let out a breath. She squeezed the trigger. The man pitched forward, sliding 5 FT across the oily concrete before coming to a dead stop. Then there was silence. The whole exchange had taken less than 15 seconds. Nora stood in the middle of the carnage. Her chest was heaving. Sweat dripped down her forehead, stinging her eyes. Her left arm throbbed violently where the pipe had struck her. She lowered the gun, her breathing ragged, loud, and exhausted. She felt the heavy pull of gravity returning, the adrenaline fading, leaving her feeling hollowed out and immensely tired. She walked over to Gallagher. He was still on his knees, staring at her, surrounded by dead and dying men. His mouth was slightly open. Nora crouched down beside him. It was a struggle. Her knees popped audibly in protest. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a relatively clean cotton napkin, and pressed it against the deep cut over his eye. "Hold that," she said, her voice grawly and out of breath. Gallagher weakly raised his good hand to press the napkin. He looked at the bodies, then back at her face. He saw the sweat, the exhaustion, the utter lack of panic. "Nora," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, Leo," she grunted, using the bumper of the nearby car to heave herself back up to her feet. She tossed the empty gun onto the concrete. "You look like hell. Let's get you inside. I think the grease trap needs cleaning anyway." Gallagher managed a weak, pained smile. "Who are you?" Nora looked down at her blood-spattered pink apron, wiping a smudge of engine oil off her cheek. "I'm the Tuesday night waitress, and you're a guy who tips decent. Now shut up and lean on me." The fire door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the stagnant chill of the parking garage. Inside, the diner's back kitchen smelled of old yeast, bleach, and the lingering grease of 1,000 cheap burgers. It was a jarring shift in reality. Out there, 6 men lay dead or bleeding on cold concrete. In here, the fluorescent lights buzzed with mundane indifference. Nora dragged Leo Gallagher by his good arm. He was a dead weight. The man possessed a lean, wiry build, but gravity was doing him no favors. He stumbled over the threshold, his polished leather shoes squeaking awkwardly against the linoleum. Nora didn't coddle him. She practically hoisted him over the industrial floor mats, her thick thighs doing the heavy lifting, until she dumped him onto a sturdy wooden crate of rusted potatoes in the dry storage room. He groaned, clutching his side, his head slumping back against a metal shelving unit stacked with giant cans of crushed tomatoes. "Breathe," Nora ordered. She didn't wait to see if he listened. She turned away, her heavy work shoes squelching slightly. She was leaving a trail, a mixture of the parking garage oil and the dead men's blood coated the soles of her orthotics. She ignored it. Her left bicep throbbed with a dull, sickening rhythm where the steel pipe had connected. She reached up with her right hand, dug her fingers into the thick flesh of her arm, and squeezed hard. The pain spiked, then plateaued. Nothing broken. The fat had saved the bone. She lumbered over to the manager's tiny office, kicked the flimsy door open, and yanked a rusted metal first aid box off the wall. She grabbed a bottle of cheap well vodka from the under-counter stash the day shift cook thought he hid well, and grabbed a tube of industrial superglue from the maintenance drawer. When she returned to the storage room, Gallagher was staring at his own ruined hand. His knuckles were split open. His breathing was wet, rattling shallowly in his chest. "You're going into shock," Nora said. Her voice lacked any bedside manner. She uncapped the vodka, took a short, brutal swig that burned down to her stomach, and poured the rest generously over the deep laceration above his eye. Gallagher hissed, his body arching off the potato crate, his legs kicked out, a pure reflex against the burning alcohol. "Hold still," Nora snapped. She didn't offer a hand to comfort him. Instead, she pressed her considerable bulk against his knees, pinning his legs to the crate. She uncapped the superglue, pinched the edges of the jagged cut together with her thick, calloused thumbs, and ran a line of chemical adhesive down the wound. It pinched and burned, releasing a sharp, toxic smell that fought the scent of the bleach. "Who taught you to do that?" Gallagher rasped, his good eye watering. "Poverty," Nora replied flatly. She blew on the glue until it set. She tossed the empty tube onto a sack of flour. Now the shoulder. Gallagher looked down at his left arm. It hung limply, the joint visibly warped beneath his ruined wool coat. The fabric was soaked through, sticking to his pale skin. He swallowed hard. "You know how to pop it back. I know how leverage works." Nora stepped back. She wiped her blood-stained hands on her pink apron, smearing the crimson into the cheap cotton. "This is going to suck, Leo. I'm not going to lie to you." She moved to his left side. She didn't ask if he was ready. She bent her knees, anchoring her heavy frame, and grabbed his wrist with both hands. She placed her right foot squarely against his ribcage. Wait, Gallagher started. Nora pulled. She threw all 300 lb of her body weight backward while kicking outward with her heel. The pop was sickeningly loud, echoing off the metal shelves like a gunshot. Gallagher didn't scream. He just let out a hollow, airless gasp and blacked out for 3 solid seconds. When his eyes fluttered open, his head was resting between his knees, and he was taking ragged, desperate pulls of air. The arm was back in its socket. The paralyzing pain had downgraded to a severe, manageable agony. "There," Nora said. She was panting now. The adrenaline from the garage had officially worn off, leaving a toxic sludge of fatigue in her veins. Her knees screamed at her. The ache in her lower back felt like a hot iron rod pressing against her spine. She slumped heavily onto a 50 lb sack of onions opposite him, burying her face in her hands. For a long minute, neither of them spoke. The diner's ice machine cycled on in the hallway. A loud mechanical clatter. Gallagher lifted his head. He looked at the massive woman sitting across from him. He noted the messy bun, the strands of grey hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, the sheer, immovable solidity of her. "You didn't hesitate out there," Gallagher said. His voice was gaining traction, the color slowly returning to his face. "You shot those men, center mass, double taps. You moved like you've spent your whole life in close quarters combat. You're not a waitress. I am a waitress, Nora said, not looking up. I poured your coffee 20 minutes ago. Before that, I was dead. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were dark, flat, and completely devoid of sentimentality. My name was different. My zip code was different. My weight was different. I worked for men like the ones who just tried to put you in the ground. When they had a mess, they called me. When they had a debt that needed collecting, they called me. Then I got old. I got slow. I realized loyalty is a joke. Men tell you right before they put a bullet in the back of your head. Gallagher listened. He was a man who traded in secrets. He recognized the absolute, unvarnished truth when he heard it. So you ate, he said quietly. I ate, Nora agreed. I put on $150. I threw away my tailored suits and bought slacks from a discount bin. I became a fat, invisible woman, flipping pancakes on the graveyard shift. And it worked. For 10 years, I haven't existed. She looked down at the blood on her orthotic shoes. A heavy sigh rattled her chest, or till tonight. The silence in the dry storage room was broken by the sharp electronic chime of the diner's front doorbell. Nora's head snapped up. Gallagher tensed, instinctively reaching for a gun he no longer had. The trucker, Gallagher whispered. Nora shook her head slowly. She braced her hands on her knees and pushed herself up from the sack of onions with a pained grunt. Trucker left 5 minutes ago. I heard his rig pull out while I was gluing your face shut. She moved toward the kitchen door, her steps instantly silent again. She cracked the door just a fraction of an inch, peering through the gap toward the front counter. Through the pass-through window, she could see the diner entrance. A black Lincoln Navigator was idling at the curb, its headlights cutting through the pre-dawn fog. 3 men stood in the entryway. They weren't wearing the tactical gear of the garage crew. These were suits, expensive, tailored wool, cleaners. The men Moretti sent when the first crew stopped answering their burner phones. One of them held a sawed-off-pump shotgun down by his leg. The other 2 had their hands resting inside their suit jackets. They were looking at the smears of blood on the linoleum that led directly behind the counter and into the kitchen. 3 of them, Nora whispered back to Gallagher. Heavy hitters. They followed the blood. Leave me, Gallagher said, his voice hard. You saved my life once. You don't owe me a second round. Go out the loading dock. I'll buy you time. Nora looked back at him. She looked at his ruined arm, his glued forehead, his pale, sweating face. She felt an overwhelming surge of exhaustion. She just wanted to go home. She wanted to take a hot shower, take 3 ibuprofen, and sleep for 2 days. She hated these men. She hated their suits, their guns, and their arrogance. They had walked into her diner and tracked mud and blood all over the floor she had just mopped. Shut up, Leo, she muttered. Nora didn't reach for a gun. She had left the empty pistol in the garage. Instead, she walked over to the flat-top grill. It was still on, radiating a blistering heat. Sitting next to it was a massive commercial-grade cast-iron skillet, heavy black metal, caked with years of seasoned grease. She wrapped her thick fingers around the handle. In her other hand, she grabbed a steel pitch of scalding hot water from the coffee station. She walked to the swinging kitchen doors. "Hey!" one of the suits yelled from the front. "We know you're back there, Leo. Come out, or we start shooting through the walls." Nora kicked the door open. The three men snapped their attention to her. For a split second, they experienced the exact same cognitive dissonance the garage crew had. They saw a giant, blood-stained woman in a pink apron holding a coffee pitcher and a frying pan. The man with the shotgun smirked. "Lady, get on the floor right now." Nora threw the pitcher. She didn't toss it. She launched it with the speed of a fast ball. The boiling water and heavy steel slammed directly into the face of the man on the left. He shrieked, a high, thin sound of absolute agony, clawing at his blistering skin as he fell backward over a bar stool. The shotgun man racked a shell, raising the barrel. Nora charged. She didn't try to dodge. She lowered her head and used her massive frame as a battering ram, launching herself over the low counter. She crashed into the man before he could level the barrel. The sheer momentum of 300 pounds in motion took him off his feet. They slammed into the ground, the shotgun discharging wildly into the ceiling, raining plaster down on the booths. Nora didn't give him a chance to recover. She brought the cast-iron skillet down directly onto his face. The sound was a dull, wet crunch. The man went entirely limp. The third man had his gun out. He aimed at Nora's broad back as she straddled his partner. A sharp crack echoed through the diner. The third man stiffened, a neat hole appearing in the center of his expensive tie. He dropped his gun, fell to his knees, and pitched forward onto the linoleum. Nora looked up, breathing heavily, chest heaving against her tight undershirt. Leo Gallagher was leaning heavily against the pass-through counter. In his good hand, he held the revolver he had pulled from the first man Nora had scolded. The burned man was groaning on the floor next to him. Leo stepped over, aimed down, and put a bullet in his head to end the noise. The diner was quiet again, save for the hiss of the flat-top grill. Nora climbed off the man with the crushed face. Her knees cracked loudly. Her apron was ruined. Her slacks were torn. She walked behind the counter, opened the cash register, and pulled out 2 $10 bills and a 5. Her tips from the night. She shoved them into her pocket. She reached up and untied the pink apron, letting it drop to the floor, covering a pool of blood. She grabbed her heavy, oversized parka from the break room hook and shoved her arms into it. Gallagher watched her. He set the gun on the counter. "You can't stay here." "I noticed," Nora said dryly. "They'll look into the diner. They'll find whatever fake name you're using. They'll hunt you." Nora walked over to him. She looked him up and down. "You owe me, Leo." "My life." He agreed instantly. "Whatever you need. Money, a new identity, a plane ticket anywhere." Nora shook her head. She pushed past him, heading toward the back exit. I don't want a plane ticket. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of hiding. And I'm really tired of flipping pancakes. She stopped at the fire door and looked back at the Mafia Boss. A cynical, cold smirk finally touched the edges of her mouth. You said you're at war with Moretti, right? It's looking that way. Yeah, good, Nora said, kicking the door open to the cold morning air. Let's go kill him. But first, we're going through a drive-through. I'm starving. That concludes the brutal, gravity-heavy story of Nora, the waitress who traded a spatula for a cast-iron skillet to save a kingpin. If you loved seeing this grounded, gritty takedown of the criminal underworld, smash that like button and share the video with your friends. Want to see Nora and Leo take the fight directly to the Moretti family? Drop a comment below saying Part 5. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next bloody chapter of the Chrome Skillet's deadliest employee.